philosophy. I'm a graduate student under Dr. Bob Howe. I'm in my third year for my thesis project. I'm researching shorebird and tern migration on Lower Green Bay, especially at a new site called the Cat Island Wave Barrier Restoration. The Cat Island Wave Barrier has proven to be a huge magnet for snowy owls. This is 3 years in a row now with high numbers of them. In 2013, we documented as many as 17 using the site at one time in December. Last year in 2014, we documented as many as 20 birds out there. And then this year, so far, there's been at least 6 at one time, and they showed up about 3 weeks earlier than they've ever shown up before. Nobody really knows why the eruption is so early. It could be because they don't have enough food in the Arctic where their normal hangouts are, or it could be that there's so much food that they reproduced a lot and now they're looking for new winter territories. But the take-home message with them is that the Cat Island Wave Barrier is a huge magnet for them because it is an undisturbed strip of land that goes out into the bay, so it's very open out there. It reminds them of the tundra. They can roost on the rocks during the day without being disturbed by people or dogs or other typical disturbances, and then they can hunt ducks and other things out there at night, so it's very ideal for them. Plover is probably the most exciting bird, just because that's a federally endangered bird, so they're more endangered than the tern species. The tern species have nested in the area before the habitat got worse. They used to nest in the area a couple decades ago. The piping plover, on the other hand, there are no records of that species nesting in Lower Green Bay, so next year will hopefully be the first year that that species ever nests in this area, and since that's a federally endangered bird, that will be a gigantic success story. There's 3 different kinds of tern nesting platforms. 2 of them have been instantly successful. In 2014, the DNR and Fish and Wildlife Service placed Forster's tern platforms out there. That's a state endangered species, and they immediately started nesting. Forster's tern is typically a marsh nesting bird, so they put dead cattail stalks on top of a floating platform because they like to nest on blown over vegetation typically, and that kind of mimics that. So they nested successfully there in 2014. About 35 pairs nested there, which was a huge success. And then last year, a different species, common tern, nested out there successfully, which is even a rarer bird, especially in Wisconsin. It's also state endangered, but that bird prefers to nest on open scrapes of gravel or sand, so their platforms, instead of being topped with dead vegetation, they're just topped with gravel, and there's some shelters so the chicks have something to hide under when it's really sunny or when predators are nearby. But both are floating platforms because one of the main losses of tern nesting is a rise in water level that'll swamp out the eggs or the babies. So if it's a floating platform, the water will never come over it because no matter how much the water rises, the nest will stay above the water level. So that was very successful this year. And then the third species, black tern, is more of an interior nesting bird, and we have not had success attracting that as a nesting bird yet, but we did see more black terns out there this year in 2015 than the past 2 years. And the DNR put, I think, about 20 to 25 platforms out in Peters Marsh, which is adjacent to Cat Island. So that may very well work eventually too, and that's another state endangered bird. I think it definitely does make it easier to accept. It's always easier to sell something with multiple benefits. If it were just for bird restoration, there would probably be a group of people who would think that it wasn't worth the taxpayer money and etc. But since it also houses dredge for the next 30 years, which is a need for a city that's on a body of water that's too shallow for ships to come in, that takes care of a significant need, and it helps habitat for endangered and common species at the same time. So I think that definitely does make it easier to sell when you can have multiple successes in the same project. I think a good success story is always the best way to spread conservation and management. I mean, this is a very large scale restoration, and obviously everything can't be this large scale because it costs millions of dollars to do something this big, but you can definitely take the same ideas and apply them to smaller scale areas that are already managed by the state or the university, like for example Point Au Sable or some of the other West Shore marsh